Welcome back, guys. Got Josh Brunt here. Let me get that mic closer to me. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, guys. Welcome back. So here we go again for another episode. So today, guys, okay, I'm really excited for this one too. I feel like every section of this book is just pure gold. It's so good. So today, we're moving on from proactivity defined and looking at, well, actually, okay, we're not moving on because it's very much in the same realm of ideas and concepts and this idea of choosing to respond, taking responsibility and initiative to make things happen. So, so this right here, this section on taking the initiative is going to be all about, I guess, that, like taking the initiative and taking responsibility for your life. Now, I'm going to combine two of them. So I'm going to do taking the initiative as well as act or be acted upon. Okay, so we're going to do both those because taking the initiative is like one page. And so I thought I would just combine both of them, and they're almost like pretty much the same thing. So I really liked how Stephen Covey, in this first part, he starts off with this idea of that our basic nature is to act and not be acted upon. So before, in earlier sections, we'd been talking about this idea of Viktor Frankl and how he discovered for himself his true nature. Through this very difficult circumstance and environment with the Nazi German camps, he was able to discover who he really was. And as he thought and pondered and reflected, he came to the realization and understanding that Viktor Frankl was a proactive, unique human being. And so part of that true nature, like the accurate map of the territory, what actually describes us as human beings is that we are proactive by nature. Our nature is to act and not be acted upon. Okay? And so essentially what this part is saying is that not only do we have this innate ability to choose a response to what happens to us, but we also have this responsibility to make things happen, to create circumstances. There's a quote that I love that says, "I am not a creature of my circumstances, I am the creator of my circumstances." So again, taking that initiative to be able to win and to make things happen for your life, right? And so that's a part of the definition of proactivity, is taking the initiative. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be like being pushy or obnoxious or like that normal sales guy that's like super aggressive using traditional tactics, right? Instead of trust-based methods. But what it does mean is that we have this responsibility to create circumstances. Like all of America is built, like capitalism is built on this idea of proactivity, that we have this innate ability to create businesses to support our economy and support our families and any sort of those organizations, and to give back to the community, which is very, very cool. And that is the case. So Stephen Covey kind of talks about this whole idea of like, if you're applying for a job, he says that you should like study the industry, study like the businesses that you're interested in. What problems are they facing? Like who are the executives or the managers there? Like what are their goals? Take like an interest and aptitude test so you can study like your own strengths and value that you can provide. And then once you have all that information, to develop an effective presentation to where you can go in and be like, this is your problem. And so like, let's say that you know them, like them and their problems way better than they do themselves. And then you provide a viable solution to those problems. Would they not hire you like on the spot? If you came in with all that knowledge, you'd come across as trustworthy, competent, expert in your field. You would. And you'd get that job instantaneous. But most people just don't take that initiative or that proactivity to make that knowledge happen and to create that effective presentation. They'll usually like agree with that and be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like a cool way to approach it. And it would definitely work. but people just fail to actually do that, and myself included in that. I definitely could be way better in doing that, and this is actually like a really cool reminder that I choose to be better in that. And like a lot of those smoke screens or objections to that or concerns to that idea is like some people say like, I don't know where to even go to take an aptitude or interest test. Like, how do I study industry and organizational problems? Like, no one wants to help me out. Like, I have no idea how to create an effective presentation. And in reality, like, those are just limiting beliefs. Are they valid? Yes. It's like how you feel. But again, we should subordinate feelings to values, which means that even though those feelings and ideas may be valid, they're not permissible. We're saying like we shouldn't let those control us. We shouldn't take counsel from our fears, from like those feelings, but rather from our long-term values that we actually truly value, such as principles, right? And so essentially like figure out how to create an effective presentation. In today's world with Google and YouTube, you can figure out how to do anything. You can figure out the industry records with online, like the websites, like you can find the mission statements of companies. You can go on the stock market and figure out how their stock's doing. You can learn what all of the numbers mean and why that's important to them, right? Like you can do it. It's just like setting aside time to do it and just getting started. Really cool though how in family life this also applies like super well, this idea. Stephen Covey tells a story about how when one of his kids would complain and like kind of wait for someone to take care of them. So like rather than being a solution to a problem, they would kind of be problems themselves, not like seizing this initiative to like do what is necessary to stop the problem, but rather just like complaining or setting aside like their own proactivity. And Stephen Covey would always tell his kids like well, just use your R&I, which stands for resourcefulness and initiative. So he's like affirming their basic nature of their ability to take the initiative, to act and not be acted upon, to create solutions, to take the initiative to make things happen, to create those circumstances. That's like really, really cool. And I like how he talks about this idea of doing that isn't demeaning. Like when you truly view someone as a proactive person and you treat them as such, you are affirming their basic nature, the accurate map of who they actually are. And so that's like critical. That's really, really important, because that will draw out of them these proactive muscles that may be dormant, but they're definitely there. Someone may be like a super reactive person, but again, that's just because of their choices in empowering the weaknesses of other people, their choices in empowering external stimuli or circumstances to control their life. And so if we can come in, take the initiative, and view them in this light of proactivity, and that is their basic nature, and affirm that, then we can actually influence those muscles to start growing again and to work. This proactive muscle, we can show them how it's done, right? Now, granted, we have to take maturity into account, right? We can't expect like super high proactive work or super high creative cooperation from people who are like very emotionally dependent or even like intellectually dependent. And so, but we can at least like affirm that basic nature, give them a view from the divine mirror instead of the social mirror, and allow themselves to truly understand what their true nature is, right? I just love how Stephen Covey, he talks about this idea of like one of the most influential things that we can do to people is to view them as something that they are, that they don't necessarily think that they are. Like an example of this is, so like 2 days ago, I went to go vacuum out my car because it was pretty dirty. We take ice baths every day, and so all the dirt gets on the, like the floor. And so what happened was we'd done this, and I I was vacuuming my car, and I wanted to get rags to like wipe down the inside of my car with all the dirt inside there, even like the mats below. And I saw that this lady right next to me, and she had a rag, and I was like, where did she get that rag? I go over, like, hey, like, how you doing today? And she turns around and she's like, oh, like, hi, how are you? And like proceeds to like give me a hug, and I'm like so confused at this point. I'm like, what is this lady doing? Like, what the heck? This lady's crazy. And what ended up happening was she viewed me as like this like dear friend, even though like we never actually met. But she knew that I was a sprunt. She lived in our ward, but like the ward boundaries had shifted while I was on my mission, so I never like met her or like knew who she was. But she recognized me as a sprunt, but I'd like never seen her before in my life. But because she saw me as a sprunt, it like affirmed that relationship. It affirmed that like we were like dear friends, and I like actually felt like a close connection to that girl, or that lady, sorry, than I would have otherwise had she not done that, and she just treated me like a stranger. So that was like a really cool experience for me that demonstrates that the way we view people can seriously shift the relationship and how other people feel, and influence them to take initiative in their life and affirm that basic true nature, the accurate map of the territory, or the accurate description of who we are as human beings, to be able to create circumstances and take the initiative. Pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to act or be acted upon, which is basically this like same stuff, but it's just a separate section, so you guys know where we are. He talks about the difference in effectiveness between people who act and people who are acted upon. And like it's not like a 25% difference or a 50% difference, but it's like a 5,000+% difference. Like it is a massive amount of gains in one's life if they are proactive, if they take the initiative, if they don't wait for people to take care of them, but they just take care of themselves and others. Right? It's amazing. He says that it takes like initiative to create the PPC balance we've been talking about. It takes initiative to develop the 7 habits, and that each of the other habits is based on habit 1. You need to be proactive in order to do the other habits. All of the other habits have this idea. They have this paradigm of you need to act and not be acted upon. You can't wait for people to come to you. All of them are like that. And so if you wait to be acted upon, you will be acted upon, and the consequences will come. So there will be growth and opportunity consequences in either or of what you're doing. It just depends on which way you do it, but there are going to be those consequences, whether for good or for worse. So a really cool story that illustrates this idea of proactive muscles, because there's like this huge, not argument, but like discussion on this idea of facing reality. Like, so like a lot of people have like this super positive mindset and this super like faithful outlook on life, and they tend to be like, oh, like everything's gonna be okay, you know. And some people are like, dude, like face the reality, like acknowledge like where you are, like no, like you're in a bad spot, you know. And so proactivity finds the balance between both of those. Again, that PPC balance of finding production of what you want, but also developing this capability to produce that, and acknowledging like where you actually are. So he tells a story about where, to like illustrate this principle, of where he was working with about like 20 different businesses in this home improvement organization. And this was in a time of like a down market, to where the trends were going down, and it was a very frustrating and discouraging time for these executives. So Stephen Covey and them, they discuss 3 questions. They discuss what's happening to us, what's going to happen in the future, and then what's our response. So it's like a 3-day seminar or a 3-day workshop, and they take 1 question a day. And so when they go over this question, like what's happened to us, what's the stimulus, he says that there's like widespread unemployment, environmental pressures. They had to lay people off. And by the end of the day, everyone was super discouraged. And then the second day, it got even worse. They were like, well, what's going to happen in the future? And they looked at like projections and future analysis. And by the end of the second day, it was even worse. People were even like more depressed because they knew that things were going to get worse before they got better, right? Just based off like future projections and that analysis. And then on the third day, they focus on the proactive question: what is our response? So we've acknowledged what's happening to us, what our current situation is. We've acknowledged where we're going, what the projections are for the market and for the environment and all that, but also what's going to be our response. So they talk about like how they could exercise initiative in this situation. Like, how can you manage and reduce costs? How can you increase market share? How can you increase employee retention or get that creativity and ingenuity out of them? And so they brainstormed until they got very like doable things, and that created this experiment of the spirit of excitement and fun and productivity and like hope, right? And so then they were able to answer the question, how's business? Essentially is what he says. And part one is like, he says, what's happening to us is not good, and the trends suggest that it will get worse before it gets better. Part two, but what we are causing to happen is very good, for we are better managing and reducing our costs and increasing our market share. Part three, therefore, business is better than ever. So a really proactive mindset, like even though you have all these problems that are being like hounded on top of you, again, proactive people, it doesn't matter to them. It does not matter to them what's happened to them. What matters is how they respond to that environmental pressure. And then they take initiative and they act, and not wait to be acted upon to be saved from their discouragements or stresses or depression or whatever it is, right? So like a lot of reactive people would say like, oh, come on, like, again, like face the facts, dude, like face reality, right? And so Stephen Covey explains here that like they did face reality. Like that's the beauty of proactive muscles, is that they very much did face reality. It wasn't faith without works. It was, no, like I acknowledge where I am. I have the faith that we can get better, and then we're going to work towards it. So faith with works, right? And so that's like the difference between positive thinking and proactivity. Is that proactivity is you like genuinely understand and acknowledge where you're at in your current circumstances. But then you understand that you actually have this power and innate ability to choose your response, to take initiative, and to make things happen. Create your own circumstances. So this can also be like tailored to like broken relationships, right? Like if a relationship isn't where you want it to be, you can definitely be proactive and build that relationship. Or if you want to start a podcast, you can do that. Like just be proactive and take the initiative and do it, right? So there's that. And then, well, okay, so I actually really like this idea of doing this in like building a proactive culture. Like that is one of like the coolest things to me, is being able to deliver value to people in this area of teaching people how to be proactive, how to awaken those proactive muscles inside of them. Because like they're there and everyone wants to exercise them, but a lot of people just don't know how to do it. And is that a product of their choice? Yeah, it is. It influenced by conditioning, experiences, childhood. Yeah, like it is. But ultimately, it's like their choice. And so, what's really cool is we can, as like leaders and managers, we can actually combine the resourcefulness and initiative, again, the R&I, of individual people in order to create a proactive culture. And that's like also one of the reasons why I love my job so much, is because creating that proactive culture is one of the most like empowering things I have ever been a part of. It's like super, super cool and very like meaningful to see the changes in people as they learn this stuff and really embody it and really internalize it. Like gives me a lot of meaning and satisfaction and joy in life. which is also why I'm like still here, because I just want to keep doing it because it's so amazing. But that can be like, this whole proactive culture can be created in families, in businesses, in organizations, in church communities, in service projects, like whatever it is. It's just that like the organization, the entity does not have to be at the mercy of the environment or the mercy of external stimuli. Each person can be proactive and can create those circumstances. They can act and not wait to be acted upon. And like one way to do that is to create shared values among people, a shared and common purpose. That's a fantastic way to kind of get people bought into this proactive culture, is like listen to people, understand them, affirm them, and create this like shared core values and like this shared common purpose between people. And as you do that, people will like buy in and actually be way more proactive than they normally would if they were all by themselves. So guys, that is it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day, guys.